Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts with a man saying that his mother said no matter how hard life gets, to dream big. Shoot for the moon, and hit the stars, and that he'd eventually become the protagonist of his life. We see him vomiting blood, he looks down at his feet. He asks if this is where he'll die, and has a hole in his chest. He explains how it was caused by a cursed spear, so it cannot be healed normally, only an elixir might save him. But of course he doesn't have any. We hear multiple sets of footsteps as a group pulls up to him. They make eye contact. And the man says, "Hey Choi Doyoon." Doyoon says he could have defeated him without his help. The man laughs saying of course. Doyoon asks him what's funny and he says that's exactly what he thought he would say. He thinks about how he worked his ass off to get here, and teamed up with this psychopath for his own survival. But to think he would die saving him. We see people hugging each other out of joy. Then the man asks Doyoon if he has an elixir, he says he does. The man says he won't use it on him, will he? Doyoon says the value of an elixir is extremely high, so he's saving it for himself, as the man isn't valuable enough to use it on. The man laughs, then says this is a messed up world. He explains how divine spirits, just gonna call them constellations, watch over humanity and their struggles as entertainment. While giving them trials and rewards, they found Doyoon's sadistic side entertaining and didn't care about a mob character like him. He says nobody cared about him. He starts to curse the world and the constellations, also cursing Doyoon, who says that's quite harsh. We finally learn the man's name is Kang Yu-yoon. Doyoon asks why he tried to fight, saying all he usually does is provide intel. Yu-yoon says that he was tired of leeching off him, and it's just his limit. Doyoon asks if it was to save the civilians, then a floating figure appears in the sky. They are called tellers, and they guide humanity to its end, and sold them over to the constellations. The teller says amazing, and that they've done very well. He says they'll be looking forward to the next trial, and with the end being close to do their best. Yu-yoon tells Doyoon to do his best, and to leave with his little minions. One of the girls gets angry, and the other tells her to ignore him. Yu-yoon laughs asking if they feel sad about him dying. But they all just turn around and begin to walk away. He tells them goodbye, then feels a sharp pain and begins to spit up blood. He says he failed to become the main character of his own life, and spent his life living as a mob character, who had no choice but to live in the main character's shadow. He wonders what he's living for, and says if he was given another chance he'd fix this regret. And that he'd climb higher than anyone else, so high that he'd not envy anyone else, and be proud. That's how he wanted to live. He closes his eyes, then plot convenience ensues. He opens them, seeing little white things, wondering where he is. He looks down and realizes he's become a little blob dude. He yells asking what the hell these creatures are, then a voice says it seems like everyone is here. We see a teller with a deer skull. He says he'll explain to them all their situation. He says they'll be working as tellers of the Celestial Body Incorporated. They are all here to prove their skills. Yu-yoon wonders what the hell is going on. Deer Skull Man says the explanation ends here, then creates a rift in the floor. He tells them all to show them what they've got. Yu-yoon starts to freak out, asking if the guy is trying to kill them all. A status window appears, saying activating Genesis blessing, and he gets an aura around him that allows him to breathe. Then he sees he has a mission that says he needs to enter a contract or else he will die, and he has an hour. He says this is hecked up, having only an hour to do this random mission. He then realizes he's actually in space, and Earth is right below him. He wonders how it looks perfectly fine after being destroyed. He says he definitely died, but was reincarnated as a teller. He decides to just focus on the mission. He says if it's the past then this is when the collectors were active. After the gates appeared and monsters poured out, they were the people who hunted the monsters down. Typical dungeon manhwa boys. He says he needs to pick a collector that didn't have a contract, and says it's strange since collectors need to enter a contract with a teller to receive a sponsorship from the constellations. Or else they can't get points, meaning that any collector was desperate for a contract. So this is way too easy of a mission right now. He opens a map and tries to press where he wants to go, but says it's short since he has little baby arms. He then realizes he doesn't even have fingers, he just has little nubs. Then something begins to change, and it jumps to Deer Skull judging them all, saying it seems like it won't be any fun since none of them are picking up on the situation. Then he notices that Yu-yoon is changed into his body. Yu-yoon wonders if it's because he wished for it, but says that isn't important. Then he clicks soul and teleports. The rest wonder how he did that, and ask what happened. Deer Skull is sweating hard, saying that normally takes 2 to 4 weeks. But with the magic of plot armor, Yu-Yun only needed 3 minutes. He quickly decides this mission won't be boring. We're then taken to Seoul. Yu-Yun peeks out of an alley, and wonders where exactly he landed. Plot convenience ensues that he landed right at the Collector Association. He says he needs to quickly find one, and he looks at the minimap, realizing that the red dots must be in contracts, while blues aren't. He says if his assumptions are correct, who he contracts with is important, since if he signs someone who is weak then he'll get no attention from the constellations. He says it's gonna be a high bar to make. Then a security guard appears, asking him if he's a collector. Yu-Yun says he's looking for someone and not to interrupt him. The man grabs his shoulder, saying only those allowed may enter here. The Genesis system activates, and shocks the hell out of the man. The security guard asks him if he's a teller, then apologizes saying he thought he was a human, and runs off saying he's sorry. Yu-Yun says this treatment really hammers the fact he's in the past, but says whatever and heads out. He then sees a window appearing showing people's names and ages. He says this won't help him with the mission at all, since he can't grab every collector and interview them. Then he spots books above their heads, wondering if they cannot see them. He says it's not from the Genesis system, so maybe it's his own exclusive skill. He only has 37 minutes left, then imagines himself pulling one of the books, and it works. He quickly starts to read it, and is surprised. He gets excited saying this is overpowered. And he's certain about what the skill is now. Back to the deer skull, he's looking at the timers for all of the tellers he sent out, and says only one is left. He says he was excited since he transformed early, but with only a minute left he's basically lost. It jumps back to Yu-Yun staring at a girl eating noodles, and she's scared asking how he got in and who he is. She says she'll call the cops if he doesn't leave. He doesn't respond, so she asks if he's even listening. He sees a shining book above her head, and he says found you. He explains that he lives in a mixed world, which is where ideas can become reality, such as myths and so on. He flashbacks to when he realized what his ability was. And it tells him not only about the person's abilities, but also how they've lived. He wonders if there's a book like that for himself, but quickly realizes there isn't. He says it's a bit sad, then wonders what the different colors mean. So he grabs another one. He says so far he's only seen bronze and silver books, so surely a gold one exists too. And how the aura on the book shows the person's innate ability and potential. So if the book is bronze, but has a silver aura, that person can become silver. He says this is amazing, and says he just needs to find who has the most potential. He teleports, saying he'll be able to find one surely. But after a bit, with only 10 minutes left, he is yet to find anyone. He realizes the timer is running out, and says he won't settle for anything that isn't gold. Then he asks a random girl what year it is. She tells him. And he wonders who is a collector that isn't famous yet. And he says there were some called the Miraculous Three, Saint Bang Sang, Flame Knight Quan Inbim, and Sword Empress Kang Hyerim. He says with Bang Song's identity being a mystery he won't be able to find them. And Inbim is still in the States, so the only one left is Hyerim. She was the strongest of the three, and remained unknown at the start of her career. He teleports, then looks around wondering why she's living in such a filthy place. He sees her eating noodles and calls out to her. She's startled, and of course we know how this went. Now we're caught up. He confirms that she's Hyerim. He tells her he's a teller and introduces himself, and how he came to make a contract with her. She's surprised, and he wonders if he chose the right person, since she's so excited. He tells her yes, he came to make one with her. She says that her abilities are bad and she cannot fight. He asks her who said such nonsense. She says that everyone around her has always said this, and told her to give up on being a collector. He says it makes sense that she's living like this, since she doesn't know her talent. He tells her they only said those things since they don't know how great her ability is. She asks if he's serious, and he says of course he's a teller so she can believe him. He says he'll help unleash her potential, and just needs her to sign. She reads it, asking if she'll be a collector. He tells her yes. She wonders where she left her pen, then he pulls one out quickly. She starts to sign it, and seems excited saying it's done. We see he only had 2 seconds left, but then gets a window saying he'll be promoted to a full-time employee. He smiles, saying he'll live this life to the fullest. He tells her he's looking forward to working with her. She's still hella excited. He explains that in the future she's very noble, so people said she was from a rich family. But it's weird seeing how different she is. He pulls the book from over her head, and begins to read it. Then he's surprised to see she has 3 specializations. He says one of them is the story of Chik Young Yong, folklore guy maybe. He just says he can't believe she has 3 talents that are this strong, and if she can awaken all of them she'll be a monster. He says Miss Hiram, and she says you're Mr. Teller. He tells her to just call him by his name. Then asks about her talents. She says she knows they are bad talent. She says during basic training they were all instructed not to talk about their talents. He tells her they are in a contractual relationship. She says her talent of Goryeo era swordmaster sounds like a joke. He confirms she hasn't told anyone about her talents, and she says it's a cringy name. He says ignorance is truly scary. She asks if he's disappointed in her talent, and begs him not to take the contract back. He says he isn't disappointed. A window then appears asking if he'd like to start his entrance ceremony. He tells her he'll need to step out for a bit, and he doesn't know how long, but says it won't be too long. Then he asks her what equipment she uses. She says she uses a shield, and he asks why she doesn't use a weapon. She says since her strength is strong she thought it would be best to be a frontliner. He asks what she used during training, and she says a spear since it had a long reach and she'd stay safe. He wonders why she picked anything up but a sword. He tells her to go exchange the shield for a sword, and then go find somewhere and practice swinging. Then she'll see how good her swordmaster talent is. He tells her to make sure to practice. She tells him to wait, but he vanishes. Then a while later, we see her holding a sword wondering if she'll even learn by doing this. Since she's never swung one before, she just goes crazy swinging. But she feels that something feels different. She wonders what the feeling is. She says she's never felt like this before. She keeps swinging, and is mesmerized. Yu Yun appears saying it took longer than he thought, and he wonders how she's doing. He sees her swinging, and says her form is steady. Even though she hasn't been taught, and it's not just for no reason she was called the Sword Empress. She then notices he's there, asking when he got there. He asks if he's in the way. He says he didn't want to bother her since she was so focused. He then sees he has a mission for a promotion, and it's asking him to create a library. Hiram asks what he's doing, and he says he's thinking of making a library. She says isn't that what tellers usually do first? Then he tells her he just started working as one. She says he looks like a veteran, and he asks her what he'd gain from lying to her. He then sees a thing to name his library, but when he clicks it, he sees it's just a list of cliché manhwa titles. He wonders if he needs to name it like this to get attention, and he sees one of the guys has already started on his story Food the Library. He clicks on it to see someone being crushed to death by evil beings, and is getting flamed by the constellations. He decides to name it later to just create the library for now. He asks if she's ready to swing her sword. Then they teleport to the top of a building. He tells her it's an entrance to the world of thoughts, and asks if she's aware that the tellers write stories after making contracts. And they show their stories to the constellations. Then he asks her if she knows what the stories entail. She says it's the life of the character. He says kinda. But the constellations are all different, so the genre for every story is different too. And the stories that get the most attention are heroic tales. And she will now become the main character of a heroic tale. She asks if she can do it, and he tells her she's got this. He explains they are in the Anvar mountain, specifically a kobold mine. He asks if she knows what they are, and she says a bit. He then opens his library, and we see constellations start to enter it. He welcomes them all, and introduces himself. They were the ones giving negative reviews in the other room. He realizes they want him to fail. He tells Hiram he'll be heading to the observer room to show the constellations her story, so she'll be fighting alone. She's hella scared. He tells her to swing like she was doing earlier. And a kobold appears. He tells her just to believe in herself. She freezes up saying even if he tells her that she is afraid. It attacks at her, but she avoids it. The kobold continues attacking at her, and she screams asking for help. She trips and falls down, saying that she's going to die at this rate, and starts to shiver. She recalls how everyone treated her, saying she is strength but is trash, and how she should be a civil servant instead. Their ridicule heavily affected her. She really wondered if she could continue like this. And wonders if she should run away, but she says she cannot do it since if she does she'll remain useless. She thinks about how Yu Young offered her a contract, and if she fails him she won't be able to face him. He shouts telling her to dodge, as the kobold jumps straight at her. She resolves herself, and blocks its attack with her sword. We see blood on her face, as she's counterattacked it, slicing the kobold in half. The constellations are shocked by this, and so is Yu Yun. Hiram says she'll no longer be afraid of fighting. Yu Yun says that's it, that's how you use a sword. A golden energy comes out from the kobold, and flies into her, saying she's earned 7 TP. It then starts to set in that she did it, and she's excited, saying she actually did it. He compliments her, but warns her the fight isn't over. He says the world is full of things that will bring her joy, so she cannot stop here, and tells her to desire more and greed for it. He asks if she can do it, she tells him yes. 3 more kobold leap at her, and of course we don't get to see it. Sad, it jumps to someone seeing how Yu Yun's library has 15 viewers. It's a senior associate teller named Totten. He says this makes no sense, even if a department is backing him. But since he's a newbie with this many viewers, he must be doing something dirty. Totten sees something, he begins to sweat after seeing it. And we see that he's wondering who Hiram is. She doesn't have any gear on, and her weapon is ordinary. He's seen many collectors, but this one is stronger than he's ever seen. She is growing stronger every minute. Yu Yun says she's getting adjusted to her ability. He tells the Constellations that this is her first battle. He tells them that she can do even more than this. Hiram calls out to him. She asks him what this is in front of her. She sees a red line. He tells her that it's the border, and beyond it isn't the farming area. It's something the collectors agreed on making in order to bring in more points. She starts to lower her sword. Totten says she's already reached the border, and it's impressive for her first time. Yu Yun asks Hiram if she's disappointed. Yeah, since it's over. He says it isn't over, and since they are here they might as well go to the end. She asks what he means, and he tells her she'll clear the entire mind realm. We learn they can be eliminated from reality if they are cleared, and once it is cleared a new one will appear elsewhere. Nobody can figure out the story without entering it, so people hesitate to enter them. Which is why people suggest not to clear them. She asks him if it's truly okay, and he asks her what the problem is. Saying she can just say he made her do it, plus it looks like she doesn't want to stop here. She asks if it's that obvious, then says she'll do as he says. He tells all the Constellations to cheer her on. Totten says what is she trying to do, and there's no way she'll cross the border. She quickly leaps through it, and Totten is surprised she actually did it. He says she must be out of her mind, since they are banned from entering. The view count increases further. Yu Young starts to explain how people used to be more interested in the mind realms, but with the borders up the Constellations all lost interest. And they started an apocalypse to try and get an interesting story. Since he knows how the world ends, this world needs to change, not by the intervention of an outsider, but on its own. The view count increases more, then Yu Young tells her that she's done well, and now they are at the deepest levels. She instantly looks super excited to see him. That's cute. He tells her they are almost there, so why doesn't she take a break? She says okay, since she was getting tired. He says she got this far due to her special talents, but her body can't keep up with it. He asks her how the sword felt. She says it was the best and she wishes she started out with it. He notices the book above her head is brighter, so something has changed inside her. He tells her this is the last level, then asks if she remembers the kobolds that ran off earlier. She says yes, and he tells her they are probably waiting for her and probably have a leader due to how they moved as a group. He says she can stop here if she wants. She laughs, saying he's kidding, right? She says she came this far, it's only fair she sees it through, and he's not going to play dumb after making her cross the border, right? He says of course not, and asks if they'll continue. She says of course. He smiles, saying he was planning to convince her not to go if she hesitated, but guess she's really determined. He tells her they should set a goal, asking if she knows how to clear a mind realm. She says yes, and he says okay, good. The mind realm's clearing condition is to clear it out, so killing all the kobolds will be good, but she'll need to aim for the leader first. He says there are all kind of ways to clear mind realms, but this one is simple. She's glad to hear it, and starts humming, asking if they should get going. He says they should swap her weapon first. She asks why, then looks down to see her blade is destroyed. He says it'll break if they continue, but it held up well. She starts to cry, asking what now. He says she earned a lot of points so far, so he's picked out the best options. She asks if there isn't a discount. He tells her needs to make a living too. She clicks, saying goodbye to all her points, then gets a sword. Now she has no points remaining. He tells her it looks great. She complains about her points, and he tells her to earn them again. Further in the cave we see the leader of the kobolds, and some henchmen. Then Hiram says it's all their fault, that her sword broke. They can tell she's angry, then she leaps at them, yelling at them. She crashes into the ground, and starts killing them. Asking if they know how hard she worked to get those points, she turns and spots the boss, then leaps at him. He's low-key afraid, then she cuts his head off in one strike. And now has officially cleared the kobold mines. It cuts to a cafe, and she screams whoa. We see her pigging out, saying it's so good. He asks her if it's really that good, and she says yes, and she's glad to have earned so many points from clearing the mines. He tells her she's overreacting, and she can eat this anytime she wants if she keeps it up. She asks him if he's serious. He says it's up to her how she uses her points, but she'll get fat if she eats cake daily. She comments on how that's rude, then says he knew about her special trait, and asks him what the Goryeo Aegis Swordmaster talent truly is. He asks if she knows about Jikyung Yang. We learn that he was a low-class military officer, and a civil servant. He alone climbed a castle wall, and cleared it out. He fought thousands of enemies, and slayed them all. He was rumored to have surpassed the human limits, and had the nickname of the Goryeo Aegis Swordmaster. She's surprised he's that great, saying his story could have been made into a drama. He tells her that his friend had a weird name. She asks what it was. He tells her he doesn't want to say it, so she begs him. He says no, and that's sexual harassment. She asks how that makes sense. And he tells her to look it up herself. She starts to Google it, then blushes immediately. She throws the phone at him, saying it's sexual harassment. The guy's name is Long Dong. He asks why she's taking it out on him. He tells her that's why they never published his story. But her talent is stronger than she thinks. She gets embarrassed, and he wonders where the future Sword Empress is. Questioning if it was all an act. He grabs her wrist, saying they can't loiter, and they need to continue their plans. She asks him what he means, saying she still hasn't finished her cake. It jumps to later, and she's asking him if it's really okay. He tells her it looks great, and she should be more confident. He asks if she remembers what he said earlier. She says not to laugh stupidly and be careful how she acts in front of the constellations. He mentions how there's more viewers now, asking if word spread already. The constellations are surprised, and Yu Eung says it makes sense, as they've never seen Hiram so dressed up. He says if they were to do a survey asking what's the most important part of a character, people would say strength. However, if you ask the second most important thing, they would say something like leadership. But Yu Eung says he would say it's about looks. The constellations are swooning over her. He says before they enter the mind realm she should learn this. He says it's a story he bought earlier, asking if she's ever heard of one. She says yes, but never seen one. He says that her talent is great, but it isn't enough to handle all the issues. Stories here are how they earn skills. She starts to absorb it and he asks her how it feels. She says it feels refreshing. He says it's a good reaction and usually collectors have a hard time taking even two in. She asks him about the stories, asking whose points he used. He instantly changes the topic, saying they should go show the constellations a good show. They enter the mind realm. She asks him where it is, and he says what did they talk about before. She quickly changes her demeanor, and he laughs trying to keep it in. He says it's the labyrinth of Crete. There's been a couple attempts, but it remains uncleared. She asks why that is, and he says they weren't able to figure out the clear conditions. She peeks around the corner to see a corpse riddled with arrows. He tells her not to make a sound. And based on their decomposition they must have entered recently. He sees that there are now 100 viewers, and there are even tellers in his library too. It's obvious they are trying to steal ideas since it's doing so well, but they can watch all they want. This is just to build regular viewers. Hands her a spool of thread, and he says it's a maze that's complicated. And in the myths Theseus used thread to get out of a maze, so she should too. He leaves, saying he wishes her well. She looks a bit worried, then he tells her to just keep pushing forward, as if it's nothing more than a trivial matter. She says okay, and we see some donations happen. She starts walking down the labyrinth. Yu Eung says even if she doesn't notice it, her mental fortitude is way above the average collector. Since she isn't panicking after seeing all of the corpses, she turns a corner and sees a bright light. She wonders what it is, and Yu Eung tells her to wait. But it's too late as she's face to face with a minotaur. It growls loudly, then goes to attack her. We hear the sound of it hitting something, and Yu Eung yells out to her. The minotaur grunts, then feels a sudden pain as we see Hiram slice across its chest. The wound begins to pour blood, and she says tonight's dinner will be cow head soup. The constellations wonder what cow head soup is, and he wishes she didn't say something so corny. He warns her the minotaur is way stronger than a kobold. She keeps attacking it, and he says the skin is thick so it'll be hard to kill it in one go, so she should do a hit and run tactic, tire it out then finish it. He asks her if she's listening to him, then realizes she has no intention of backing off from this. She dodges its attack, and lands on the floor. He then notices that her sword begins to glow, and says this is nuts. Since she's using sword aura right now, he explains that sword aura is when people reach a certain threshold with the sword, but I'm sure most people here know what it is, but he says that most collectors don't learn it on their own and instead acquire it through a story. But Hiram developed it all on her own. She and the Minotaur yell at each other, and she slashes it in the head, causing it to be immediately launched backward, and we see that she destroyed the floor from her attack too. She stares at its corpse, and gets spammed with donations. She is excited. Young says he didn't even have to do anything, and the number of constellations doubled. They are growing really fast. Hiram says something is weird, and he asks what's wrong. She says that she killed the Minotaur, but the mind realm isn't cleared yet. He says that's because it wasn't the clear condition. He says everyone must be curious as to why it hasn't been cleared. It's because it isn't cleared by defeating the Minotaur. Many collectors in his past life tried it that way, but none of them succeeded, since they didn't figure out the real method. He tells her the way to clear it is to escape it. She says then she just needs to follow the yarn back. He tells her that would take her to the entrance, not the exit. She asks where it is then. He looks up, and she asks if he means the ceiling. He asks if she knows the story of Daedalus. She says yes. He says it's a genius inventor, so much so he created this complex structure, but someone escaped when they weren't meant to be able to. She says he means Theseus, right? He says yeah, and since Daedalus told him the method of using yarn. King Minos trapped Daedalus and his son Icarus here, but they still found a way to escape. She seems excited, and he says there are feathers scattered all around the place. She runs off saying she knows what to do, and gathers a lot of feathers. Then says this should be enough. Then she asks what this is, and he congratulates her as she's acquired Icarus's wings, which let her fly once a day. He asks why she's just staying dazed, and to do what he said earlier. She says that is really lucky, and she gets a ton of TP, and donations. Back at her apartment, she seems very proud of herself, and the wings. He says they look great, and she says that she is a full-fledged collector now, and considering the points they earn she's not the same as before. He tells her to stop posing, and she blows him a kiss saying her charm works on the constellations. So how can he pretend not to like her? He barks at her saying to stop. She calls him mean, then he asks if she went to the association. She says not yet, and asks why. He says she needs to update her class, as she can't stay in class 9 forever. And she needs to go higher if she wants to earn money. She immediately starts to fly out saying to wait for her. He tells her to wait. At the association, people are taken aback and keep talking about how pretty she is. He tells her not to show her wings off, and she nervously says she didn't have the thought. At the desk, the receptionist asks what he can do for them. Young tells him he's here to claim the reward for clearing the mental realm. They start to talk about how two were cleared recently, and wonder if she's the one who did it. Some of them even start to say they won't last long with their selfish attitudes of ignoring the barriers. The receptionist asks if anyone else helped her, and Young says she did it solo. They all say that's a damn lie, and the receptionist asks about her rank. He tells her she's rank 9, and he says he'll get someone else, so wait. They start to talk about how they thought she would be a class 5 at least, and a 9 clearing a mental realm is a lie. Young is glad she seems fine, and a man approaches them, asking why they are coming in here, lying through their teeth. He says it's a joke a woman like her cleared a mental realm. She stares at him, and doesn't answer. He gets mad that she isn't giving him a reply, and starts throwing more shade at her. She still doesn't answer, and he raises his fists, asking if she's still going to ignore him. Young says she clearly doesn't want to talk. The man asks why her manager is butting in, saying to mind his own business. He says he'd prefer to be her colleague, and the man calls him a con artist. He says he doesn't know where he came from, but unless he wants to be beaten up he needs to get the hell out of here. He says he doesn't want to. The man gets ready to hit him, and Young warns him about Hiram. He ignores it and swings at him, but she grabs him by the arm and stops him. The man says she better let go while he's being nice. Then we hear a loud bang and see that she slams him into the floor. The dude turns into Yamcha, but I'm sure he'll walk it off. Young says he told him that he needed to be careful. The dude wonders what's going on, saying there's no way such a small woman did this to him. He gets up and screams while going to hit her. Everyone is afraid that she's going to be hit. Then they see her put him back on the floor again. They say he's a class 7, so how is he losing to a class 9? The man gets angrier, as he realizes Yu Young planned this from the start. He starts to get up with Hiram still on his back. The bystanders wonder if they are actually planning to fight here. The man says that he won't forgive her, and will show her his strength. And that he's going to rip Yu Young's smirk off his face. Hiram tells him to stay still and kicks him further into the ground. The dude is in denial, and Yu Young says it looks like she mastered one of the skills on her own, that lets her increase her body weight by using aura. She looks at him and begins to blush. The bystanders begin to realize she's stronger than a class 9, and some men in suits come over asking what's going on. Saying fights aren't allowed here, and asks who started this all. Yu Young says with how late they are intervening someone must have wanted to watch all of that. Another man walks up asking why they are fighting here, asking if they think they are a joke. Yu Young asks the man if he's in charge here. The man says yes, asking who he is. Yu Young says he's the colleague of the person involved in the incident, and there's been a misunderstanding. They didn't fight, but had a slight conflict of opinion. And the man just acted out on his own, so Hiram had to apprehend him. It was just self-defense. The man asks if that's really the case. Yu Young says to look at Hiram's demeanor, she is peaceful, and has no injuries. He says if anything the man should be thankful they solved it. The bystanders say it's true, they didn't start the fight. The boss dude says he apologizes. Yu Young says she just needs to receive her rewards, and asks when the person in charge will show up. The man says that he's the guy, and he's sorry for being a bit late. Then says he'd like to have a word separately. He says okay and tells Hiram to follow. The bystanders say she's really pretty, and Yu Young is glad her debut went so smoothly, but now it's time to mooch off everything the association has. He mentions how the dude in charge has a bright silver book above his head, so he won't be an easy person to deal with. And even just now the man wanted to pressure them, but changed his attitude immediately. And that isn't a talent, but it's based on the experience he's made over time. He opens a door, and guides them in. He introduces himself as Choi Jaongmo. He says he holds a lot of responsibility here. Yoon Hyung introduces himself and Hiram. They talk about how she solo cleared the mind realm, and Jaongmo says that's unbelievable. He says everyone thought that until she showed her abilities. Jaongmo says that's true, and asks what he wants from them. Yu Young says he speaks quite strangely, and all they want are their rewards. Then asks if he's planning to not give them. He awkwardly laughs, saying he isn't responsible for approving decisions. Young says he thought he was in charge. He apologizes, and Yu Young says he had an idea that the association wouldn't give a proper reward for her clear, and doesn't want to beat around the bush. And what is important is that they don't want to give them rewards, and they should speak properly from here on out. We already know how if a mind realm is cleared there won't be a new one added. Because of this, the government and collectors all accepted not clearing it. Jaongmo says he's being quite blunt, and says they've made the situation hard to manage, and asks if they are aware of that. Yu Young says yes, and the reason the mind realms exist is to tell stories to the constellations and prove their values as collectors. But now when you look at how people are acting, they are going against that. Jaongmo says that's untrue, and if a new mind realm is created it'll take a lot of money and people to analyze it, which may lead to many deaths, so they keep the mind realm normal to prevent the loss of lives. Yu Young says it's just an excuse. This angers Jaongmo and he asks if he'll take responsibility for those who die. Yu Young asks why he'd need to when they are doing their jobs as collectors. Not only are they not getting rewards, now they are being asked to take responsibility. If they die or not is their own fault. Jaongmo barks at him more, saying to watch his words. Just because it's unrelated to him, it doesn't mean to take it lightly. Yu Young questions him about people's lives being on the line, and says it's laughable since they'll all die at this rate anyways. He say leaving the mind realm because they are afraid will solve nothing, which is why they acted. Collectors are rotten and only think about their own safety. The man asks if he's different. Young says yes, he won't hide or stop others. Jaongmo laughs, asking if he believes he needs to be rewarded for that, and no matter what he says it won't change how society is and how it functions. Yu Young asks if he isn't afraid of the aftermath. Jaongmo asks what the two of them alone can do. He says it may just seem like that, but he asks how he thinks the others will react. Jaongmo asks what others he means. Then we hear the good old window sound, and he looks up to see countless windows, about how the constellations are furious. Yu Young says he forgot to mention it, but he's a storyteller from Celestial Bodies Incorporated, then welcomes him to his library. What a chat. Jaongmo says he thought he was simply a manager, with his humble demeanor, and his way of handling the negotiations it's far above the usual way tellers handle human interactions. He wonders when he started planning this whole situation. Then he realizes this entire situation was planned by him. He starts to pour sweat, saying that given the situation no excuse could turn things around. If the association's image is ruined here, and bad rumors start to spread among the constellations, it would cause trouble for all collectors. In the association, he starts to brainstorm, saying he needs to find a solution. There must be a way out of this. He sees Yu Yun smiling, and feels nothing but fear. Because when he looks into his eyes, he can tell that he's being toyed with. His legs start to shake and he sits back down in the chair. Yu Yun laughs, saying he's glad that his senses are sharp. Though he wishes he was more foolish, it's unfortunate. If he didn't back down he'd have been able to get more out of him, so he's quite smart. Ja Ongmo asks what he wants, but Yu Yun says he's explained enough. Ja Ongmo says he wins, and he'll give them their reward, and a bit extra for his discourtesy. Yu Yun says he doesn't have to go so far, but it'd be impolite to refuse. Yu Yun asks the constellations what they think, saying maybe they can let this one slide. Some of them say to rip him apart, and he decides to go for the majority who say it's fine. He receives some donations for how he acted, and tells Ja Ongmo to make a deposit into the account by the end of day. Ja Ongmo says alright, then Yu Yun says one more thing. He tells him to stop being so afraid, and he just needs him to find someone for him. Ja Ongmo asks who it is, and he asks him if Choi Doyun is among the collectors. Ja Ongmo says he's never heard of that name. Yu Yun says he doesn't know if he's a collector or not, but he knows he's around 18 or 19, he says he's got quite a handsome face. He'd appreciate it if he could find him, and send him the information through the Genesis system. Ja Ongmo asks if he knows what he's like. He thinks for a second, then says he's rude as hell. It cuts to later and Hiram says she thought she was going to die of nervousness. Yu Yun says she did great. She says that it was just her acting because she didn't want to make a mistake. He says to get used to it since she'll be doing it often. She asks if she can just do what she normally does. He says never, while thinking about how she acts. He says everyone was talking about her earlier, her acting was perfect, she was seen as a charming, calm woman. And they are all admiring how beautiful and strong she was. He tells her to imagine the future when everyone is praising her. She says okay, and she'll treat him today since she's a promising figure. He tells her to dream on, and there are other matters. She asks him what, then he senses something, and says he needs to step out food a moment. He says he'll be back soon, then teleports away. We see him floating above the city, asking a man who he is. The man stares, so he repeats it. The man says he must be the new recruit, and he came here to give him the honor of joining the Pentagram Division. Yu Yun asks him again who he is. The man says he's his senior. He asks him what business he has with him, and the man barks, calling him insolent, saying he's too arrogant. Yu Yun says to call him by his name, and introduces himself. The man is surprised since it took him 3 weeks, yet he got his instantly. He says his name is irrelevant and he just needs to join the division. Yu Yun says nah. The man is baffled, and asks him to repeat it. Yu Yun firmly says no, asking how many times he needs to repeat himself. The man is surprised he's acting so arrogantly, and wonders if he's part of another division. Yu Yun mind controls the freak, saying that isn't the case. The man reminds him he's his senior. Yu Yun says to act like one if he wants to be treated as one. He flames the guy, saying he doesn't even seem like an assistant manager. The guy is shocked he knows. Yu Yun says he just thought he'd come over and pick on the newcomer huh. The man brings up his division again, and Yu Yun says to go tell them he'll never join, if he's in there. If they really want him to join, then send someone with discernment, or tell the one in charge to come. And if he understands then to get lost. The guy teleports away, and he returns back to Hiram, who is surprised he came back so quickly. She asks what other matter he mentioned before. He says it's time they hire a manager for her. It jumps to later, and they are walking down the street. They come across a management facility, and he says this isn't it. But he knows that it is around here somewhere, then he spots it. She's surprised, since it seems lackluster compared to the other places. He says this is the one, then knocks on the door. We hear a woman say 1 second, and they wait for a bit. Then a woman opens the door and asks why they are here. Yu Yun doesn't say anything, and he begins to have PTSD. We hear Doyun saying it's too late to mend whatever relationship that was broken. While it may be fine for a bit, there will be problems sooner or later. While it's regrettable, it seems like he won't be seeing her around anymore. Yu Yun watches as he holds the woman by the throat, saying to stay far from people who've lost all humanity, and the woman is bloodied. The woman's voice echoes, and snaps him out of it. He quickly apologizes, he says she looks the exact same. They go inside, and she introduces herself as Baek Shuryun, and is the CEO of Baekwa Management. She says they must be here to join them, right? He says it'll be Hiram. Shuryun sees her and is surprised that someone so beautiful wants to join. Yu-yoon reminds her she doesn't need to put an act on here, and she goes straight smooth-brained. Her image gets bricked out of Shuryun's head. She says that she can see Hiram as a collector, but what about Yu-yoon? He tells her to take a guess. She says if he were a collector, he wouldn't bring her to find a manager. Then she asks if he's a teller. He's surprised she guessed it so easily. She says since tellers are different from normal people, it's not impossible to tell them apart. If you look closely, they have an aura that makes them stand out. We learn that in the future she will become the leader of the Baekwa squad, and will lead many people. She ended up becoming a captain, using her decision making. He tells her that he's indeed a teller, and she's excited. A teller came to her office. Hiram says he's amazing. Shuryun asks how they met. She tells them, and after a bit they bring up the contract. They sign it. Then Hiram asks what a manager usually does. Shuryun says they provide support and make sure the collector is able to focus on work. They manage things such as schedule, food, interviews and so on. Hiram asks if she has any other employees, since it sounds like a lot. Shuryun proudly says no, and she used to work for a well-known clan before this. She should be handling the driving too, but has no money after buying this office. She's forklift certified, and can weld. She's the GOAT. She tells them she can handle it, and Yu-yoon tells her not to worry, he'll handle picking out mind realms and other scheduling issues. Since Hiram is still a newbie, they won't be needing her right away. He thinks about how if they consider her progress they'll have to attempt something soon, then Shuryun won't be able to sleep. They head out, telling her they will contact her when it's time. As they leave, Yu-yoon says he knows it's random, then asks her if she has a dream. He recalls asking her about what she wanted to do in her past life, and she says she wants to make a ton of money. He says yup, she's still the same. As he's walking down the street, he realizes this is why her and Hiram got along so well. Hiram also mentions it to him, saying even though they just met it feels like they've been friends for a while, asking if that's weird. He recalls them being close in his past life, and tells her not at all. We see the teller from earlier all angry that he wasn't being treated as a senior, and he says he'll get him back for being so arrogant. But he needs to cook something up since he's being protected by Genesis's blessing. Then he smirks saying there is a way, and it jumps to a week later, and we see people talking about Hiram and how she's cleared 4 mind realms. She asks Yu-yoon if it'll be dangerous this time, and he says yes. Since it is a really special one. Unlike other mind realms, you can only enter once every 3 months, and if you fail you cannot enter it again. She asks why he picked something so dangerous, and he says she became a collector to become successful, right? She says yes, and he says he's the same. He might be a teller, but he wants to climb higher than anyone else. Her goals and reasons may be personal, but it's not a bad thing. And half-assed desire only holds you back. If you want something, then give it your all. He asks her if she can do that, and before she can answer, the mind realm begins to open. He says she doesn't need to answer right away, but she will need to sooner or later, for both of them, and she's brought onto a battlefield. Some of the collectors wonder if they'll be fighting too, since it's a large-scale war, and we see soldiers shouting and preparing to hold their ground, as heavily armored men charge at them. Yu-yoon sweats, and recalls the screams of people as they were slaughtered. He says he won't let it happen again, and he swore it to himself. A week ago we see him with the cute little blobs and deer skull, and how the entrance ceremony will be with the constellations. The little blobs are surprised. Deer skull says the constellations won't be in the same room, so do not worry. Everyone grabs some drinks and food, and Yu-yoon says that Celestial Body Incorporated is the most well-known of the 3 large teller organizations, and he's really surprised by the landscape. It's a giant city floating in the stars. One of the blobs with horns walks up, asking what he's doing alone over here, and why he's not enjoying the banquet. He says he doesn't want to, and Horns asks if he thinks he's better since he changed his appearance, and warns him that they'll be catching up soon, and waddles away. Some non-blobs appear, and everyone is surprised. They say they are from the other departments of Celestial Body Incorporated, and want to get to know their employees. But of course we all know their true intentions are to find the useful ones and get them into their department. Yu-yoon doesn't want to be bothered, so goes to leave, and a man calls out to him. Then he gets swarmed with people trying to get him to go to their department. He wonders how he'll get out of this. Then he spots someone he recognizes. He quickly runs to them saying they should have said they were here. He asks them if they recognize him, hoping they catch on. The person says they were distracted, and Yu-Yun guides them away from the crowd. Yu-Yun says it must have been sudden, but thanks them for playing along. He wonders why the dude isn't saying anything, and quickly saying he'll be going. The man says that's amusing, and he disguised himself so the others won't see him. So how did he spot him there? And Yu-Yun feels a dangerous aura from the man, and realizes that he's dangerous. He asks him what he wants, and the man says he's just curious, and has no intention to harm him, for now. Then asks how he saw him. Truth is, he didn't, he just saw a book and he focused on it, which allowed him to see the man. Yu-Yun says it's his special ability, and he says he has a special eye to see what others cannot. It was iffy at first, but when he noticed nobody else saw him he used him as an excuse. The man says that's hard to believe. Yu-Yun says it's true though, he's different from the other tellers. The man says he noticed that. Yu-Yun apologizes to the man for talking to him like that. The man says it must be fate that they met like this, and asks if he wants to make a bet. Yu-Yun doesn't want to, but the man says he needs to guess who he is, and if he does he will reward him. He asks what'll happen if he doesn't. The man says he'll need to take responsibility for interrupting his entertainment. Yu-Yun says the man is certain he won't guess, and he just needs to look at his book. But he realizes that he actually can't open the book. Which means he's that powerful, which is part of how the mixed world works. You can't act out of line based on your level. He recalls that constellations will be here, and he starts to talk about the 5 factions. There is Eden's Heaven, Asgard something, Hermopolis, Olympus, and finally Pandemonium, where the highest ranked stories reside. So with the ominous energy, and this creepy ass book, with the 3-headed snake, he starts to guess who the man is. It's a snake that corrupts, a red dragon that sets flames, and the one who was close to the brightest light, but ended up falling into the depths. The man in front of him is Pandemonium's first-generation constellation, Satan. The man suddenly grows hair, and begins to laugh saying he is correct. He starts to clap, saying he truly didn't think he'd do it. So he wins. It was only a joke, but now he's surprised. It'd make sense for him to be punished for sneaking into the entrance ceremony, so he cannot punish him. Yu-Yun says he definitely would have punished him if he lost, since Satan is a man of his word. Satan says he lost so he'll keep his promise. He says he'll be creating a library soon and show them a story right. So he offers to become his library's sponsor, asking what he thinks. He realizes getting a sponsorship from a high-ranking constellation is nuts. He'd be grateful to get one from a mid-level or 3rd general. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So if he just grabs his hand he can get it, but he hesitates, wondering if it's really okay. He begins to second-guess it and really questions, and decides to decline the offer. Satan asks why. Yu-Yun says it would be a great benefit, but then he'll lose the freedom of his library. Worst case he receives hostility from the constellations of Eden. Satan says he knows where he's coming from, but even with all of that doesn't it benefit him? Yu-Yun says it isn't enough for him. Satan asks him what he means. Yu-Yun says constellations are incredible, especially Satan, and he's eager to work with him. But the moment they work together, he can only have stories from the limited environment of Pandemonium, and his library's authority will go to Satan. And he believes in the endless possibilities and stories that he can show in his library in the future, so for that path he must refuse, and he trusts Satan is wise enough to understand that. Satan starts to laugh saying to think he'd have a bigger ambition than even having Pandemonium as his own. He says it isn't like that, and Satan says he's complimenting him. What he's saying is right. The moment he sponsors his library he'll obtain ownership, which means he will give his potential up. But he didn't do it, and decided to pick the most difficult path ahead of him. It seems foolish, but perhaps that's what caught his attention. He says they should end the conversation here, as he doesn't want to force his demands on someone who doesn't want it. He asks Satan if he's giving up. He says he's not sure and it makes him more greedy, which will make him want to forcefully acquire him. Then asks him one more time if he really doesn't want his sponsorship. Yu-Yun says that he wants donations from the constellations, but without a deal like this. Satan says if another teller said this he'd punish them for being arrogant. And how it'd be bad for his image if he hands it over with nothing to show for it, and since he won the bet there is a price that follows, and he'll soon give him a gift with his name on it. He says he was truly happy to meet him today, and he'll make sure to visit his library in the near future. Yu-Yun is sweating, and wonders how long it's been. He decides to go further away from the other tellers, and ends up in a library. He says it's surprising there's one here, and it looks like nobody is coming for him. Then he opens a book saying he'll kill some time. As he reads, someone approaches him, saying it's strange for a guest to be here. Yu-Yun looks over to see a bright light, and realizes it's someone special, as the book is shining so brightly, and how large the book is, the story within must be valuable. The man asks him who he is, and he replies that he's a new worker. The man laughs, saying he was rude then and due to how complete his appearance is he didn't realize he was new, and says he must be the rumored one. Yu-Yun asks what brings the elder here, and the man says he's the manager here. He asks if he works here, and the man says no, he's retired and just volunteers to manage this place. He realizes the man has an unusual past. The man asks if it's okay for him not to be at the initial ceremony. He says he attended like what they wanted, and everyone was pestering him so he ran away. The man laughs, saying that happened to him too in his youth, and asks if it means he isn't in a department. Yu-Yun says yeah, and he wants to keep it that way. The man asks if he's afraid of not picking one. He replies saying he'd be lying if he said he wasn't. But that he has a goal. The man says he is longing to, Yu-Yun asks what he means. The man says tellers aren't biological creatures, but are created. And have a blank slate when it comes to what they want to do, while the system guides them, or if a high-ranking teller tells you. But walking a path of someone else's choosing is wrong. Most tellers don't have a longing, and very rarely they do, and they have a clear path ahead of them. He tells him to follow him, and he'll show him something fun. Yu-Yun is surprised as they walk through a hallway. The man says since Celestial Body Incorporated was formed, this is the place that stores all of the stories that influence the mixed world the most. Also known as the Hall of Fame, we see things like Robin Hood and Frankenstein's monster, and so on. Yu-Yun is really excited, then the man stops, saying that they've reached the end, and 30 years ago life was cut off. He brought him here since he wanted someone to remember this place, as it's now jammed deep inside without anyone knowing about the brilliant stories. And if one day he disappears from the world, he would be saddened to know that nobody knows about this place, since he's the only guest who visited this shabby old place. The other tellers only care about earning points, and repeat the same stories, and don't care for the older generation stories. But he believes that there will be a day when those stories are necessary. Yu-Yun explains how after he died Do-Yun kept living and defeated the trial, and might have ended up here. He also wants to be like this. It angers him. He then tells the elder thank you for giving him this experience. Then he asks the elder for his name. He smiles, saying if he visits again he'll tell him. Yu-Yun looks at him with joy, and says see you soon, and the ceremony ends. Back to the mind realm, and he's calling out to Hiram, and snaps her out of her panic. He tells her to stay focused. She asks him if this is a war zone. He says yes, and that it's the siege that signaled the end of the medieval era, in which over 150,000 Ottoman troops fought the Roman Empire. It's the siege of Constantinople. And the Romans lost and were destroyed. She asks if they are on the Roman side playing defense. He says that's right, and in his previous life she awakened her skills here, earning the title of Sword Empress. So this is a must for her. In a shaky voice she asks if he's watching. He tells her yes. She's scared, asking if they can win this, and she thought it would be easy with over 50 collectors, but nope. He says that even 500 wouldn't be enough, since there's only 7,000 versus 150,000. And if they count the support force it'll be over 300,000. She asks if there's even the smallest chance. He tells her there are 2,000 constellations watching. It's not just to show off the library, but a once-in-a-lifetime chance for many people. It's also a good chance for the constellations too, and he's sure the constellations of other libraries are watching her. She smiles, saying then clearing the mind realm isn't the goal. He says it's a bit off, but not wrong. If they aren't able to show their worth then they'll lose their constellations to other libraries, but their goal is to clear the mind realm. They'll pull out if it's dangerous, but should put their full effort into clearing it. Hiram couldn't clear it in his past life, and while she got far she failed. And it's not that much of an exaggeration to say the current Hiram has caught up with the Sword Empress. So it's worth a shot, to try truly clearing the mind realm. Some people ask Hiram if she's planning to act alone, and suggest she work with them and split the rewards. She turns her head, and the woman with him says she's just cocky after clearing some mind realms by herself. Hiram reminds herself to keep cool, and they just wanted to use her. A loud voice welcomes them all, and they wonder who it is. The man introduces himself as the Roman Emperor Constantine Dragus Paleologos. As the emperor he'd like to offer his gratitude to the brave mercenaries that have gathered. Hiram says she knows he's an illusionary being created for this scene, but he feels so realistic. Emperor says it looks like the preparations are done, then the windows appear, saying the battle is beginning, and defend the castle, and they only have one chance. The man and woman from earlier say this is free and jump from the walls, and start attacking the Ottoman soldiers. He laughs, asking if that's all. The girl he's with says if he has the time to yap, then to keep casting spells. Yuyun watches all of this, saying that's not right. We watch as the couple keeps clearing up the enemy soldiers. The man looks onto the battlefield, wondering when it's going to end, and it's not just them. Other collectors also talk about how endless it seems. Yuyun says they all wore themselves out by going all out from the start. On the other hand, Hiram is still doing fine. He wonders how things are in the other libraries. He heads to the gathering room for libraries. And some tellers are angry that their collectors didn't listen to them, and decided to go all out off rip. Yuyun sees someone mention the Sword Empress, and we see that she's garnering a ton of attention from the Constellations. The angry tiger dude says Yuyun is cocky because he got lucky, and he tells his collector to step it up before the Constellations all leave. Yuyun says the battle is definitely tiring her out a bit, since she's slowed down a lot. And he wonders what choice she will make while against a wall. An explosion is seen on the castle wall. Hiram turns around in shock, and Yuyun tells her it's an Orban cannon. The Ottoman would use them a lot. And that's what just happened. The soldiers say they need help blocking it, but the collectors begin to worry about dying. The emperor begs that they help them. Hiram thinks that if everyone helps they can do this, but she turns around to see them all running away. She tries to tell them they need to help. A man says that she doesn't know since she's a noob, then asks if she thinks they all failed for no reason, and everyone needs to run away at some point. She says that if they do that, then what happens to the soldiers protecting this place? He tells her they are all fakes, and grabs her by the collar and says stop bothering him. She glares at him, and wonders why he's giving up so easily. She watches them leaving through the portal, and asks what she should do. The emperor says he already knew that the mercenaries would run away, back to their actual world, leaving them all to die. He's experienced this loop of hell countless times, but despite all of that, he does not give up. Because he cannot stand by, idling watching his men die, even if it's his fate to lose. He will fight against it, and never give up regardless of how many times he dies. Some Ottoman soldiers say they see the emperor, and offer his head to the Sultan. They charge at him, and he watches as the enemies are just obliterated. They wonder what just happened. Then see that it's Hiram, and they ask if she's Joan of Arc. They only know she's a mercenary. The emperor asks what she hasn't run, saying they can't turn the tables anymore. She says they need to fight, and she won't let them die in vain. The emperor says that's shocking since no mercenary has ever done this. She asks if he remembers it all. He says of course, they've been created in this place, and he knows the man he is based off is nothing but history, so he's just a remnant of that. Hiram says that isn't what he is, and she thinks of them as living people. Which is why she is still here. He's surprised she thinks of them as people, and she asks if he doesn't want her to. He starts to feel something deep in his heart. A fire within him is starting to ignite at his joy. Then he says of course he does. And he really appreciates the fact she's saying their lives are valuable and real. The enemies begin to charge back in, and the emperor asks Hiram to buy them time. She says okay. Then he shouts, telling his men to protect the front line, and their savior. She charges in, and Yuyun notices her book is silver, and he says she's caught up to her past life here, and he wants to watch her fight. The view count continues to climb, and she begins to fully unlock her Goryeo Aegis swordmaster talent. A soldier leaps at her, and she dodges the blade while getting cut a little but stabs the soldier in the chest. She continues to battle and her white outfit begins to take on a red color instead. The Tiger Teller and Robo-Dude start to mock Hiram, and Yuyun snaps at them, telling them to stop yapping. They are scared now, and he flames them for running away from the battlefield, and he asks if they thought they'd get something from staying behind his library, or asks if they want to die. He says they are complete garbage and treat collectors like machines. And asks why they have the audacity to look down on others. They stay quiet, and he says at least they know their place now. He just hopes Hiram is successful. Another cannon shot fires and starts to make the defensive line fall. Some of the soldiers say to fall back, and they begin to panic. Then they see Hiram and call her a saintess as she stands before them. And begins to maintain the line by herself. She wonders why she isn't giving up, saying it'll all be over if she dies. While she doesn't know, she feels like if she were to give up she'll lose something important to her. As she's deep in thought an arrow flies in, hitting her in the shoulder, and the enemy soldiers say to charge her. But the Roman soldier quickly get in front of her saying to defend her. But are hopelessly slaughtered. She sees one of their corpses land in front of her, and she said she believed they could win, but she was full of pride. She thought it would go her way. She begins to wonder what to do, and the constellations become sad and frustrated with her attitude. Some of them defend her, saying to just leave. Yun realizes things aren't looking good, and says there are too many viewers to do anything, and he starts to block the people flaming her. He begins to panic without knowing what to do. Then they all stop talking, and he wonders what's going on. Then he looks over to see that Satan himself has joined the library. Satan asks why the atmosphere is so tense, and Yun says it's because they are all nervous, then says he's late and he thought he'd be here sooner. Satan says he was busy, and things seem interesting. Yun tells him it'll get even more interesting, as he's done sitting around. He enters the mind realm, he tells Hiram it's all over, and she struggles to speak. He says it's okay to give up, and she'll die if she stays. She did her best, but some things cannot be controlled. She says that's right, some things are impossible. He asks if she'll give up, and she shouts no. She says that she knows it's just stubbornness, and something you'll never be able to reach for, but how can she just give up? She cries, asking why he's saying something so cruel. Everyone said she was hopeless and should give up, and she wanted to at one point. But then he came to her saying she has talent. She says that she's learned a lot about herself. Which is why she's here right now, and realized what she wants to do. She stands up using her sword, saying she doesn't want to run away anymore, she's sick of it. He tells her that she'll die, and she says she knows, but she refuses to give up. Even if it makes her stupid, she wants to remain stubborn. He says he sees and an enemy begins to charge at her. She says she needs to block it, but she cannot move. She grits her teeth saying this is where she'll die, and says sorry to Yun. He says that's good, and he stands in front of her. Then undoes his protection from the Genesis system. The soldier attacks at him, and we see blood fly. As Yun kills the soldier, Hiram is surprised, and Satan begins to laugh uncontrollably. Yun says he's always wanted to be the main character, and it's a regret he had in his past life, and Doyoon also did nothing but shit-talk him for being hopeless. Which made Yun genuinely believe he was trash, but Hiram is different. She held on to her will until the very end, and when faced with death she stood her ground. So he refuses to watch idly by, and raises his sword at the enemies. Hiram asks him if he's insane, saying he might die. He says he felt like this was the right thing to do, just as she did. He slashes some more enemies, saying he's as determined as she is. And since there's over 1,000 viewers, it's a fabulous stage for a nameless actor's debut. She starts to laugh and cry, then thanks him saying she will leave it to him. He says alright, then opens the dimension shop. People always say tellers should never intervene, and tellers agree they shouldn't. But he refuses to stick to that mindset, as there is no rule stopping him from protecting those he holds dear. He decided to use a method never done before. The soldiers decide they need to kill Hiram to win, but Yun cuts them into pieces saying he won't let it happen. They watch on in fear, as he single-handedly holds their army back. Hiram thanks him for giving her courage, for telling her that she can keep moving forward. The enemies wonder why they can't get through him, and he says because he's strong. Duh. Hiram begins to recover since if Yun is fighting, she will too. He puts his sword into the ground, wondering how much longer he needs to hold on. The enemies say they can tell he looks tired, then wonder what the hell is going on. And he turns around to see Hiram has fully awakened body sword unison, and the heavenly sword path. The enemies realize they need to leave, and yell to fall back. But Hiram unleashes her attack, sending an aura attack across the battlefield, leaving a path of destruction in the ground. Yun is surprised she became this strong. The Emperor then appears thanking him for buying them time. Yun says it was just temporary and he'll stop them for now, but once they recuperate they will lose. The Emperor says there's nothing they can do without the forces, but Yun says there is something they can do. And the war here won't end like normal wars, they need to kill their leader, that's the only way they can win. It sounds impossible, but with Hiram it really isn't. They are currently backing off, and they are heavily outnumbered, but with 300 men they can do this. He asks the Emperor if he can spare it, and he looks over to see his injured soldiers. And he tells them he owes them greatly. And they've given their all, and he told them the gods would help them, but it isn't happening. So he asks them to continue this fight with him, all the way to the end. He says it's not a demand or an order. They can leave if they want, but is anyone willing to stick with him and see it through? They begin to walk forward, and he can see their eyes are full of determination, and they seem hopeful. He thanks them all, and Yu says it's time to go. We see another man's perspective on the way, and it's the leader of the Ottomans, Mehmed II. He says something feels different today, and normally by now they'd have left. Then a man shouts, telling him the Romans are charging forward. Mehmed wonders what he's planning, and the emperor shouts telling everyone to attack. The Ottomans unleash a volley of arrows at them, and some men get taken out. Yu tells Hiram not to look back, and that they knew what would happen, but in order to protect their nation and family she must succeed no matter what. She watches as another man is stabbed by a spear, and says she has to help. But the men fighting tell her not to worry, and they'll handle things from here. They finally ride until they meet the Sipahi, which are the Ottoman cavalrymen. Hiram and them dismount quickly. When they land on the ground, Yu tells her to continue forward, without looking back. They start to head towards the Sultan, and the enemy soldiers cut her path off, calling her a witch. She instantly beheads the three men, with teary-filled eyes. She screams in her head that she needs to be faster than this, and stronger so that as many of them can survive as possible. Yu tells her he can see the Sultan from here, and he thinks that it'll be bad if they can't take the enemies out in front of Mehmed, and he sees a tower shield on the ground. He tells her he'll hold it up, and she should use it to leap at the leader. He holds it up, and she grits her teeth, then jumps onto the shield. He sends her soaring through the sky, and he tells her to fly. She activates the wings she got from the labyrinth, and the soldiers are speechless as she flies like an angel. Some of them aren't fazed, and tell the rest to shoot her down, and she begins to serve to avoid their arrows. She starts to fly directly at Mehmed, and he looks up at her saying amazing. Hiram lets out a primal scream as she gets closer, and Mehmed compliments the emperor before her attack finishes him. After slicing him in half, everyone is surprised as they watch the Ottoman soldiers begin to fade out. They can't help but stare at Hiram, and she points her sword into the sky, and loudly shouts that they've won. The soldiers begin to cry with joy, and the emperor does too, saying this is what he wanted, the sight of them all smiling with joy. He thanks them both, and says although they are made solely for this world they won't forget the kindness they showed them. Yu says he wasn't made for only this, he's smiling and shedding tears, so they are truly living people. Do not belittle yourselves. As one proud being to another, thanking him is enough. The emperor laughs, saying he wants to reward them both, but he doubts money can express his thankfulness. So he bestows upon them knighthood. Yu is surprised, and Hiram asks what's up. He tells her that it holds a great significance, and it grants one the power of storytelling. It's something you can never obtain with points. The emperor then gives an oath on his name granting them knighthood, which increase their physical combat abilities. As he fades out, he says he hopes glory lies ahead for them. The soldiers thank Hiram, saying they'll not forget her, and they all fade out, leaving what was an echoing battlefield, silent. Hiram cries, saying she thought they'd fail, and some windows say the constellations are speaking their names, and they earn points for clearing it. She starts to laugh, saying there's no going back. She asks if he'll stay with her, and he says he's unsure on what the future holds, but he will always be by her side. She smiles, saying that's what's important to her, and now their names will be imprinted on this world. Yu watches as a book appears, and he recalls all those who called him worthless, but now he has his first story. About the fighting teller, and the sword empress. At Manhwa management, we see Suhirun getting spammed with phone calls, saying that their schedule is full right now. Yu says she looks very busy. She eventually gets off the phone asking if he's giving up the divine blessing. Hiram is laying on him, saying of course he did or else she couldn't touch him. Shiryun asks if it's dangerous for him to do this. He says of course, but since he's fighting with Hiram to think of him as a collector too. Hiram is happily kicking her feet, saying they are much closer now, and he bonks her head, and asks Suhirun if she's okay. She says yeah, but when else will they get this many calls? And she can't believe they actually duo that mind realm. He tells her to be careful with what she accepts, and we see she's already turned down hella offers, and they've got commercial offers too. Yu says to reject them unless they are from major companies. He also keeps getting offers for donations from Constellations, but with how many subscribers they have now he needs to establish rules in the chat. Hiram says there haven't been any major issues yet, and he tells her it's because of this and pulls something out. She asks what it is, and we see it's like a fruit. Suhirun pogs out asking if it's the fruit of life, and how she's very well versed in myths. He tells her he got it as a gift after the Battle of Constantinople. Of course it's from Satan. Hiram asks if it's that incredible. He tells her it's an invaluable item, and if he were to carelessly eat it as he is now, he'd explode. He then gets a message, and it's someone named He who resembles the glittering light. Yu-yun quickly stands up, saying he's got an important guest to talk to. And they ask him who it is. He teleports without answering and looks around, seeing absolutely nothing but clouds. Then a voice says welcome, and it cuts to the grumpy old dude. We learn his name is Jin Peng. Peng wonders how Yu-yun cleared Constantinople, and realizes if he doesn't crush him the department will punish him. He wants to shut him down. He realizes without his divine protection he can be attacked, although he can't knock him down. We see a board with people wanting her dead, so he starts to cook up a plan. Back to the meeting, Yu-yun turns around to see wings, which is revealed to be the Archangel Saint Michael, saying, "Thank you for listening to the sudden request." Yu-yun says he never expected one from Eden. Then Michael spawns in a table, saying to have a seat, and reintroduces himself as Chris Hansen. Michael says he brought him here to verify some rumors, and asks if there's anything that comes to mind. Yu-yun says he must be talking about Satan, since they are arch-nemesis. Yu-yun says it's a misunderstanding, and he isn't affiliated with Pandemonium. Michael says that's reassuring. Yu-yun says he didn't think Eden would think highly of his library. Michael says he doesn't let rumors sway him, and he didn't find any ties between him and Pandemonium. But it is true that he and Satan are acquainted. Yu-yun says he met him at the entrance ceremony, then talked for a bit and parted ways. Michael says he gave him the fruit of life solely because of that. Yu-yun says he took an interest in him, and he had a hard time declining his offer for sponsorship. Michael asks why he declined it, as it would have been huge. Yu-yun says it would have, but they have different values, and he feels like his goal is more important than a sponsorship. But it only made Satan like him more. Michael says he's glad he verified the rumor, and he guesses it'd be safe to say that he hasn't sided with Pandemonium. So how does he feel about becoming sponsored by Eden? Yu-yun says he thought this would be brought up. He thinks about how Eden has the greatest divine force in the mixed world, and their image is great, so the offer is good. But we already know he will decline it. Michael asks why, and Yu-yun says it's for the same reason as declining Satan's. He doesn't want to be picking sides. Michael asks if he plans on telling stories that aren't only good, but have evil as well. Yu-yun says it's not that simple, and he just wants to be free from influence, as a story like that has never been told before. He can think he's cocky, but he can watch as he takes his own path, saying surely he's curious about the ending of the library of a teller who declined his offer. While Michael is generally greedless, he's one of the constellations that yearn for stories. While he might not act like it on the surface, he is burning with curiosity. Michael asks if he wants to have both Pandemonium and Eden at the same time. Yu-yun smirks, and Michael says he understands, and the story has gotten his attention, so he'll confirm it with his own eyes. And he'll show him gratitude for meeting like this. Yu-yun asks what he means, and Michael says it'd be bad on his image if he just left after asking him to meet. And as a sign of thanks, to take this, and pulls out an egg. Yu-yun is excited, then he goes back to Shuryun's office, and they wonder what kind of egg it is. Yu-yun says it could be a dragon egg, and if that's the case it'd be cute and treat him like its owner. But of course he knows it won't, since Eden dragons are disgusting. They all watch as the egg is about to hatch, then a cute bird owl comes out of it. Suhirun and Yu-yun's eyes turn giant and they say it's so cute. It jumps onto Yu-yun's head. He realizes Michael did it on purpose since Satan's symbol is a snake, and owls and snake have gang violence. Eve comes with its own booklet. Yu-yun suggests he name it Uli, or Ul. He asks if she's joking, and she says she thought it was cute. Suhirun suggests he just name it after himself. He decides to name it Bekio, which is white owl. Owl happy. It jumps to a mind realm. A woman asks how it's going, and a man tells her it wasn't as much as he'd have liked. She says that she'll be going in now, and then they are surprised to see Hiram and recognize her as the Sword Empress. For normal people she's just a celebrity, but for other collectors she's a demon who eats mind realms. She says there's quite a few people here, and Yu-yun says it's because it's in the city center, and it's great for farming. Then we learn that she has the nickname of Farming Spot Breaker, and the collectors quickly hurry to enter before she can. She smiles, saying their reactions make her want to clear it faster. Yu-yun tells her to take Hyo and back up so he can make an announcement before opening the library. He opens it, and as people begin to flood in, he sees 2,000 already have joined. He welcomes them to the story of the Fighting Teller and Sword Empress. The constellations just start to chat PvP. He tells them all to calm down, and that he wanted to make an announcement, and that he plans to be setting some rules. He tells them not to form cliques within the library, and not to talk about other libraries or collectors since it could cause issues. And no hate speech to other factions. And besides that, anything over the top will be dealt with. Someone donates saying he's so strict and they want to leave, he boots them out saying they are free to go. Other constellations are impressed he was so swift, then he gets a fat donation and the man says he'll send a lot of donations, so calm down. Yun thanks him, but tells him rules are rules. The man donates 10,000 asking if he still won't do it. Yun starts to get annoyed by this. Yun says it's the White King of the setting sun sea, and if he can donate that many points there's no doubt about it. It's got to be one of the dragon kinds of the four seas, specifically the Western White Dragon. He says for the Blue Eyes White Dragon to be here is surprising. He donates more saying to be moderate, saying they talk amongst each other a lot. Yun laughs saying moderately, then stops laughing and says he refuses to do that. Everyone is silent, and the White Dragon asks what that means. Yun says it's no, asking if his answer isn't clear enough. He donates more points, asking how much he needs to pay for him to bow his head. Yun thinks how there's nothing he couldn't resolve with using points until now, but he's different. He says even if you give more points it's useless, he made the rule so even he isn't an exception to it. No matter what he tried to bribe him with, it will not change the rules he's laid out, especially in regards to the White Dragon. This angers him greatly, and the sky begins to turn red. Yun says he must be hella pissed. The Genesis system is forcefully activated, as an attack is stopped from hitting in front of Yun. He explains that it'll protect the lower world from the upper, and it stopped the attack. The White Dragon calls him a lowly teller, saying all he had to do was take the money, and there's nothing that can't be accomplished with money. And begins to spam donate points to him. Yun doesn't even bat an eye, and thanks him for the donations, but says he made a hate speech towards tellers, so congratulations on graduating. Then bans him from the library. The other constellations say that shit was wild. He reminds them that rules are rules, but it's just the start, and if they are well behaved he can retire some of the rules. A red light appears in the sky, and is followed by a message appearing calling him a bastard. Yun is surprised he bypassed the ban, and has re-entered. He says to go against the system, that's crossing a line. The White Dragon calls him a lowly teller again, and asks if he thinks he'll get away with insulting him. Yun reminds him he's never insulted him, he just simply removed a guest that wouldn't comply with rules. This angers the White Dragon further, and then Michael enters the library, and asks what is going on. The system activates again, and detects external interference, and excessive power usage from the White Dragon. Then activates a procedure based on the rules, and the White Dragon gets zapped. Yun says it's a compelling force that even high-ranking constellations can't ignore, so for a mid-tier constellation to go against it, he'll be dealt with for a few dozen years. He gets evicted again, and leaves the chat. Yun says if anyone else has complaints about the rules then speak up now. Nobody says anything, and just waits for Michael to do something. Yun waves for Hiram to come over, and he says they'll be clearing another mind realm today. It won't be as hard as Constantinople was, and they're doing something easier. They start to pog out since Hiram makes an appearance, and he says they'll be going after the Theodolant wetlands. He says it's very different from the mind realms they've done so far, and they should find the border first, and he'll tell her about the realm real quick. A man calls out to them, asking if they can hunt together, then asks if it's just the two of them. He says they normally work as 6, but lost 2 due to circumstances, so maybe they'd like to join. Hiram wonders if they really don't recognize him. She says since they are here to clear the mind realm they can't just team up. Before she can say no, Yun tells them they were looking for a party too. She wonders why he's agreeing to it. Then sees they got a baddie, and wonder if it's because of the woman in the party. She says she thought it was weird he showed no reaction when she touched him. So this must be his taste. The man tells Yun they should do their best, and he tells Hiram to come say hi. She angrily greets them, and the guy says they'll go get their stuff. After they leave, he calls to Hiram, and she says she understands his tastes. But now she knows she'll try to match it. He tells her to keep her image up, then gets close. She asks why he's doing this when the constellations are watching, not that she's complaining. He tells her to listen well, and that the party is made of scavengers. It jumps to them with a corpse, and them robbing it, while the man laughs. Scavengers are of course people who make a living by collecting stories and texts left by other collectors. I just see the Detective Conan guy. She asks if they only approach them to steal their stories. He says they'd be saints if it was only that, but that they are vicious murders. Detective Conan guy again. She says if he's saying it then it's probably true, but how did he know they were scavengers? He says they outed themselves, saying this place was too difficult, but their clothes were too clean. And the place is a swamp with water that comes up to their ankles, so it's impossible not to get dirty. What's more suspicious is that they approach them without knowing them, even if they don't know them. Approaching strangers asking to party is odd. She asks why he accepted the offer. He says there's no fun in rejecting. And he wants to ask the Constellations. He informs them to the situation, and asks if they'd have just avoided them, or what else they'd have done. Everyone says to not let it slide, and to crush them. He says the plan is to feign ignorance, and then suddenly go on the offensive. Saying it'd make for a dramatic story, she asks if he thinks they'll be fooled. He asks if she knows who the easiest to deceive are, those who think they know things when they really don't. People like them are his favorite prey. It jumps to later with a plant being cut in half, and they are complimenting Hiram for being strong. One of the guys wonder why she's so strong, asking if she hasn't gotten tired yet. The man then asks Yu-Yun where he's going, and he says he has to do something real quick. The man says it's dangerous, and to take Woon with him. Since he has to go pee, Woon awkwardly says yay. Then Yu-Yun starts to talk to Hiram with telepathy, saying they'll make their move soon, so be ready. As he's walking with Woon, he says he seems like something is off, asking if everything is okay. He tells Woon to talk if he's troubled. While the rest were scumbags based on their books, Woon at least was normal. Woon shakily asks if his name is Yu-Yun. Woon tells him to run away from here. The Constellations are surprised by his attitude. Woon says that those three are murderers, and Woo-Hyun forced him to tag along, suggesting they kill people. He wanted to refuse, but he was too scared to say no. He says he'll go back alone, and lie that he killed him. Yu-Yun says that'd be bad, and asks why they want to kill them. He says a famous teller hired them to do it, and would make a library contract with them if they succeed. Yu-Yun gets an idea, and the Constellations find Woon admirable. He tells Woon to stay here, and asks if he thought they'd randomly trust strangers out of the blue. Woon asks if he's saying he knew from the start. Yu-Yun says yeah, but he just proved he's a good guy. He asks what about Hiram then, and we hear a scream. He says it's probably over, and we see the group is defeated in the doo-doo water. Woon is surprised, and Yu-Yun says no point in tying them up. But he thinks Hiram is amazing. He asks the group to get up, and when they finally wake up they see him and Woon together. Woo-Hyun asks if Woon ratted them out, and says that he's going to kill Woon. Yu-Yun kicks him in the shoulder, saying he's not aware of his situation. Yu-Yun starts to say everything he's done bad, and says he planned to kill them both today too. Then asks him who hired him. He says he won't tell him since he knows he won't murder him. Yu-Yun asks if he's afraid of the law, and he says the worst he'll get is prison. The Constellations are saying to kill Baek Woo-Hyun, who is saying when he gets out of prison he'll kill Yu-Yun. Baek Woo-Hyun asks if he's silent out of fear, saying he should have thought about it before messing with him. Yu-Yun says that isn't it, then stabs the man beside him. Woo-Hyun looks over and starts to sweat nervously. Yu-Yun says he's heard enough. They see their companion is dead, and begin to shake in fear. They scream begging for forgiveness. Saying they were out of their mind, the woman begs him saying he made her do it. He raises his sword, then Hiram stops him. He asks her what's wrong, and he says certainly from her perspective it looks bad. Then she cuts the head off the woman. Yu-Yun is speechless as the woman's corpse lays in the swamp, and he says he definitely didn't expect that from her. Woo-Hyun starts to scream, and Hiram says she'll take care of him too. She says she realized in Constantinople what she needs to do, to attain her goal, and she is always ready to do whatever it takes. Woo-Hyun says he wants to talk it out, and Yu-Yun quickly says he needs to tell them what he knows, as he has no right to negotiate. He says if they kill him they can't find the teller who hired them. He says it's Jin Pung and the man's face tells it all. He says he knew about their secret deal, and tells Hiram to get it over with. She approaches him as he begins to scream, and begins to beg Woon to save him. She gets closer, and he yells for help, then realizes nobody is coming and cries. He looks over at Yu-Yun and sees him smirking, then has his head cut off by Hiram. Man, he got ahead of himself, huh? Yu-Yun really enjoyed all of this, and laughs saying he knows it's twisted justice, but it's part of his nature, after having endured the world. So he can't help but find it exhilarating. He then says he hopes Pong will entertain him too. Woon is hella scared, and falls down asking what happened, and sees Woo-Hyun's head then begins to vomit. He wonders what he's done, and says for the first time he decided to help someone. It meant nothing since he was being played. Woon shouts why, asking why they killed them. Yu-Yun says if he didn't they'd be the ones to die instead, and if he didn't do it then Woon would be dead too. Woon shouts, saying it must all seem like a joke to him, since he's been given so many special treatments. He asks him what he'd know about feeling like trash. Yu stares at him, and says everyone has their unique role in life, and they just refuse theirs and strive for more. They steeled their resolve and worked hard, and risked their lives. To him it might seem like they haven't worked hard, but they are just like him. Woon asks why he's still like this, and Yu says it's because he's conformed to reality. And he needs to take what he wants with his own hands. Woon asks if he thinks he wants to give up. Asking what he can do if nothing changes despite his efforts, and it all ends in failure. Yu thinks about it, then says the world of humans is small and he mistakes what he's feeling and seeing as the world. If someone labels you a failure, he thinks the whole world sees him that way, because that's the only thing he focuses on. He says the world beyond what him doesn't even care about him. Nobody is blaming him, they don't know who he is. If he wants to change, he needs to change how he views the world around him. Show people that don't know him who he truly is, and it'll be hard. But it's less pitiful than rotting away without trying. He tells Hiram it's time to go, and she asks if it's okay to just leave him. He says yeah, it'll be fine. Then we hear the plant screeching, and see the boss of the theodolent wetlands named Lepra. Hiram dodges its attack, she leaps into the air above it, slicing it into pieces and earns chi sense expansion as a skill, and acquires the story of a weeder. She lands back down, and the realm begins to vanish. Then she notices all the blood and stuff begins to leave, and she says she really likes this feature from the mind realms, since only injuries remain. She then says she's noticed that Yu has been deep in thought for quite a while now, and turns out he was thinking about Woon, since his book began to glow after hearing his words. He realized that people can truly change, and just need a push forward. He tells her it's nothing, and then they are teleported back outside. The collectors begin to cry since she ruined their spot. Some constellations laugh at the reactions. Yu says he feels a bit bad, but they should head out now. They get back to Shuron's, who asks them how it went. Hiram says nothing special, but she got many rewards and shows her. Yu then asks to see her status window, and she shows him. He thinks about something and she asks what it is. He says the stats section looks vague, and it seems oversimplified. Despite her rapid growth, the stats being marked low rank is weird. She says it's weird. He tells her it's kind of a big issue, since if they are marked so vaguely it makes it hard to gauge her level. He explains how after the apocalypse there was a lot of major overhaul in the stats window. He asks her how it'd feel to work hard and grow, but your stats remain the same when you check. She says it'd probably be a little despair mode. He says exactly, and it's got to be an intentional attempt to demotivate collectors. He says he thought the apocalypse was a result of carelessness by collectors, but what if there was another reason they started slacking off? What if someone caused it all from behind the scenes? He says if it's true, and begins to laugh. Hiram asks what's up, and he tells her it's nothing. He says he can't wait to bring down whoever is hoping for the downfall of Earth. It jumps to another day, and Shuryun comes back into the office. Hiram asks where she went, and she says to meet with the magazine publishers, and that she'll probably do an interview soon. Hiram is surprised, and Shuryun says she'll be getting more exposure from now on. Yu says that collectors are like celebrities, so don't stress, and an interview will be great. She says she only knows how to fight. He says she'll get a lot of money for the interview, and her personality instantly flips. She says she'll do it. Suhirun changes the conversation, asking Yu what he's doing. He says he's working on a new weapon. Hiram says that's just a sword from the store though. He says that's right, it's only 100 points, then tells her to look at the information. She says it says Salio Ancient Relic Longsword. He says she might not know, but Salio is famous in the mixed world, but it's an empire that was destroyed a few thousand years ago, that was known for magic engineering. And this sword is a relic from there, though nobody else knows the value, except for him. Since he's from the future. He then tells Hiram to work on her main attack skill, as she'll become a mid-level collector soon. She won't lose out to other mid-level collectors in physical stats, but she doesn't have a skill to go alongside her physique. So she needs to prepare for a mid or high level story. Hiram says those are expensive though. He says he knows how to get them cheap, and to look for lightning steps in the low level stories. He tells her to find it in the point store, then he says to go to the mid section and find Berserk Lightning in her skill, and then among the low levels again to buy Thunder Fury. And to buy all three of those. Shuryun says those are all known for being ass though. Nobody can handle the speed of the lightning steps. Berserk causes the body to shock randomly, and Thunder Fury requires an IQ test to use, and they are known as the useless trio for skills. Hiram doubts, Then he tells her to trust him and she instantly buys them all. She says she just has to learn them all, right? Then she absorbs the skills and shocks herself. Yu-yoon says now then puts the sword over her head, and the lightning begins to be absorbed by the blade, and Soo-hyun watches as the blade transforms into a completely different one. She's super excited, and he tells her to be careful. He knew it was amazing, but it's even better in person. He then says it looks like Hiram is done, then asks if she feels uncomfortable. She says no, and he says to open her stats and see the new skill. She says he's right, and they created a new skill called the Heavenly Lightning Sword. He says it'll help her grow, and it's a hidden piece that lets her control lightning from the heavens above, and it's better than most high-level stories. Hiram is super happy, then jumps at him, but he sidesteps her ult. He says he'd be shocked by her as she is now, then she asks how he knew about this, saying if he showed the constellations they'd have loved it. He says that's true, but it'd create its own problem too. He says to forget about it, and gives her the sword saying to absorb the lightning she cannot control. It begins to do just that and Soo-hyun is surprised, and tells Yu-yoon to follow her. He then asks if he used Hiram as a battery to make the sword, and he says it's all to help her out, and he wonders if she's worried about her. Soo-hyun says if it went bad her office would be burnt. He asks if that's what she was concerned about. Then tells her to give her a heads up next time. He then receives a message. It's from Ja Eungmo who says he has information on Choi Do-yoon. This surprises him, and he says he'll be heading out for a bit, and runs off. He says since it's a new start he doesn't want to get involved with him, but yet he's focused on him. He wonders if he'd be mad seeing him, or he might end up feeling nothing. Whatever the case, he wants to meet him. He goes to Ja Eungmo's office, and says he'd like to meet him. But Ja Eungmo comes on his own, and says to follow him. He says first he has a question, then asks his relationship with Do-yoon. He says they aren't acquainted, he just knows about him from rumors. Ja Eungmo says it wasn't hard to find him at all, then hands him a picture asking if this is Do-yoon. We see it is, and he says this is him. Asking where he is, he says 10 years ago when Earth was added to the mixed world, he went missing. If you've watched till the end, comment, monkey, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.